Christian Burke. I want to talk about smart clothing in healthcare and how we might change the delivery model for healthcare to make it more affordable and more data rich. As we look at the cost of healthcare, the major factor that we're going to be seeing in the upcoming years is the aging of the U.S. population in particular. Locally, we're even going to see that exacerbated by a Midwest whose population on average is getting older as younger people are moving out to more exciting or attractive places, and people are migrating to the Southwest and the South. What I want to take a look at in particular is the increase in the percentage of people 65 or older, and how they are using more and more healthcare, to the extent that the GDP expense of healthcare may not be sustainable. So the focal issue that I want to look at is how we might use smart clothing to better track patients. As one method of incorporating technology into healthcare, we might be able to do a better job of keeping people at home if they're people with chronic conditions, and even monitoring them within hospital and clinic settings where they don't need maybe a high-touch environment where people are constantly checking in on them because their vitals are being tracked remotely and passively. And I believe as tech becomes more affordable and the population ages and healthcare costs continue to increase, we'll see a need for this kind of technological innovation. So what I want to look at is what would happen if smart clothing did become more affordable and capable, and maybe what would happen if it didn't. So we would see aging population, outpatient care growing. These things are obviously already happening, healthcare cost increasing, and copays increasing. So if the smart clothing becomes more capable and more affordable, I think what we would see is that smart clothing might mitigate some of the costs by making the staff able to use remote data rather than have to check in and check vitals themselves. We might also see a lot more telemedicine and telehealth. Patients then would also be able to track some of their own data, as this data would be visualizable in a mobile application. On the other hand, if these things didn't happen and if smart clothing was not available or affordable, we might see that we continued the current rate of healthcare costs. We would see more high touch. I think you'd see healthcare continue to be flooded with needs that were unmet and so costs rising. And if we look at a health system like CHI, with which Creighton has a partnership, what we would notice is that without this kind of intervention, this is obviously an example, but without this kind of intervention, readmittance rates would continue to increase, and CHI might look for other ways to economize through mergers. As opposed to, if they were to incorporate smart clothing, they might see satisfaction rates increase, readmission rates decrease, and be able to find themselves at the leading edge of a healthcare innovation. The cost of this, I think around $500,000 probably makes sense. What's good about this is that the electronic health records has already enabled us to bring digitized information into healthcare. There's a computer in nearly every doctor's office these days because they have a mandate to have electronic health records. They don't have to reintegrate a lot of electronic information. It's now just a matter of taking the current electronic health records and integrating the data into them. So that is not an insignificant amount of work, but it's not like laying a platform. So the infrastructure and the database, around 100,000, and then application development for the 2 different mobile operating systems that are prevalent today, which would be iOS and Android, plus the smart clothes themselves would have a cost. And I estimated a pilot study of about 1% of the potential usage with CHI, which would be, in my rough calculation, around 50,000 patients. And so 1% of those people getting smart clothing, I think I got it at about 157,000. So a total of around 500. And then ongoing costs, we would still need ways to visualize that information, to keep track of the data, pay for those databases, update the applications as technology changes, and to bring in some customer service and training to help work with people who are having trouble maybe with their smart clothes or the applications themselves. How would we make this work? Well, patients would need incentives. Having access to the information and to the applications themselves is not enough. I think there'd be ways to make the usage of the clothes maybe subsidized by the sharing of the data. Should patients use them all the time and share the data, maybe the cost becomes nil to them. Basically, they're providing a value. Health practitioners, they already have access to value or access to data, but they would need to use data more and better. And that might mean less one-on-one, in-person time with patients, but it would also mean more time potentially with patients using telehealth, being able to track the data, take a look at it, Skype, or use some kind of other teleconferencing to use to communicate with the potential seniors who they could then check in on with a relative ease. Clinic staff and administration would also need to be updated in their skills, really putting them in a vanguard in terms of health care delivery. And then IT workers, you'd be really just kind of giving them more of the sort of things they like to do anyway, which is, coding and hooking things up and making things work better. And I think that that's how we would end up making smart clothing work for the future for CHI. Thanks.